Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are here and getting started. We're just about a minute or so early. So I'm going to just play around with the settings here for a second. Let's see, share screen. All right, can you guys see a PowerPoint presentation? Let's see here. Can you guys see a PowerPoint presentation or no? No. Okay. All right. We're going to get that going here in just a second. Virtual background layouts. Okay. Share screen. Entire screen. Yes. Okay, so you should be able to see a PowerPoint presentation now. Let me know if you do see that. And I'll switch back and forth here just one second. As we do this, we were covering Introduction to Professional Locksmith REKEYING 101. Just so everybody knows. This is going to be hosted by myself, Wayne Winton. Okay, all right, so I do see it. Very good. All right, so this is presented by myself, Wayne Winton, and Wayne's Lockshop Productions. The only thing I can see are comments in the comments section. So if you have a question, just make sure that you ask it in the comments section. That's all that I ask here. This is going to be presented by myself, Wayne's Lockshop Productions. The instructor is going to be Wayne Winton, certified ALOA instructor, Associated Locksmiths of America, ACE instructor, copyright, all rights reserved, text, video, and photos. Okay. I am the owner of Wayne's Lockshop, which is one of the largest online video collections on the web. Oh, we can see too much there. Okay, so we got to come back to this. Gotcha. All right, so about the instructor, myself, Wayne Winton. I've got 10 plus years in the trade. ACE, ALOA certified instructor. Wayne's Lockshop, the Wayne's Lockshop Education Difference, ultra high definition videos and photos designed specifically for education. Okay. Wayne's Lockshop Productions is ready to design classes and for hire. If you have any associations or any manufacturers or suppliers you'd like to work with, we do create classes just for those particular instances. All right. Support and join your locksmith associations. ALOA, I keep mentioning them. I am the Southwest board director for board director for the ALOA, ALOA Locksmiths Association for Professional Locksmiths. And this is a great way for you to support your local communities and make sure that the locksmith is actually the one in charge here. So associations do help a lot of people. Sometimes, people like what they see. Sometimes people think that associations need a little work. And here we have one that we're going to try and help out and try and make this association as good as it can possibly get. Okay. So one of the other things that we've got going on is this education is funded by sponsorship. And today's sponsor is going to be Freeman Manufacturing. That's Freeman Tools, Freeman Locksmith Tools, precision tools for the locksmith profession. And here is a good old Freeman #2 key machine off on the right-hand side. Probably one of the staple marks of the industry, one of the most recognizable tools in the industry. So we want to thank Freeman for making this possible today. And if you're going to be selecting tools and machines to work with, this is one of the nicest machines you can work with right here, this Freeman #2 key machine, along with all of their other key machines as well. So what are we going to do? Before rekeying or doing any locksmith or security work, we need to do our due diligence, right? That is the number one thing that we need to do, is make sure that we do our due diligence, verifying the person that you are working for, and making sure, are they the property owner? Do they have permission or authority to do the job? Do they, is it a landlord type of situation? Was there a death in the family? Problems can occur with landlords and tenants and evictions. We're not police officers. We're not law enforcement. Therefore, we should not be trying to enforce the law because we're not trained on that. So you need to make sure that you work with your local law enforcement and understand that everything is according to what they have to say. Problems can occur with domestic disputes and divorces as well. So you want to make sure that we stay on top of that. And trust me, if you are rekeying a home and one of the parties comes home and they are the removed parties, they're going to be pretty upset. So you definitely want to keep that in mind while you're there on the job. So I usually ask, is there a domestic dispute? Is he in jail? Is she, around? Or is somebody going to be coming by? Where is this person and what are they going to be doing while we're doing this? And other problems can occur with inheritance and death in family. So let's say somebody hires you to rekey a house or open a safe or do whatever it is that they're doing. This could be the perfect opportunity to try and deceive somebody, or somebody who maybe was not intended for inheritance might be contacting you to do something that they're not supposed to be doing. If that's the case, you do not want to be part of that. Okay. You do not want to be part of that at all. CYA, cover your assets. Always make sure that you cover your assets and make sure that you cover yourself in every situation. Just to protect yourself, your business, and everything that you hold dear. Here we have a cylinder. So we're going to go over basic lock rekeying. I struggled with where I wanted to take this series and what I wanted to do with it. And I want to make this the most professional education center there is. And I want to provide the best, highest quality education that I can possibly provide whatsoever. So I want to go back to the beginning. I want to go back to the basics, and I want to start there and then enhance on everything on top of that. So if that makes sense to you, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning. Now, most of the people watching this probably already know how to rekey a lock. However, there are still some tips and tricks that anyone, and I mean anyone, can learn through this process, okay? Also, if you're a current shop owner or you're looking to hire employees, look and see for yourself if my standard of education is up to your standard of education. And if you deem it as such, then you can literally give these videos to your employees and they can learn how to do this at home. You can send them home with a lock cylinder. You can buy them a trainer lock, and you can send them home, and you can send them home with some tools, some equipment, and this video, and they can actually be doing it at home, so that when they're with you in the truck or in the shop, you're maximizing that time and training that person on other things. So this is going to be a great at-home educational training tool. If you're not training an employee and you're just using it for yourself, and this is your first time trying to become a locksmith or a security professional, that's cool too. We've got something for you too. Okay, got something for everybody here. So the first thing that we need to do is this photo was just taken off of Google Photos. You can see a little photo logo right here. Google Photos from GMS cylinders. This is the K002, and it just had a really nice display of all of the parts. So we've got a lock cylinder, and as that lock cylinder is exploded into pieces here, we could begin to see all of these pieces and how they interact. We've got the spring cover that's going to keep all of the springs inside the housing. It's also going to keep the top pins or driver pins. It's usually a good idea to refer to these as driver pins because driver pins are different than top pins, and top pins could be listed as top master pins. So those top master pins could be confused and the terminology could get confused. Bottom pin is also another term. We can use that bottom pin, or we can use the term key pin. Key pin is actually probably one of the terms that I would prefer to use in this application. So we got driver pin and key pins here. Then we've got the housing itself, the plug, which is what we're going to be rekeying. This is the portion we're actually working on here. That slides in. Then we have a retaining clip or a retaining cap or a cap screw of some sort. And then we have a tail piece. So what happens is the key goes into the plug goes into the housing. It then has to meet the puzzle pieces and make sure that all of the information here is correct. And when the shear line lines up correctly, then it allows the tail piece to turn and the lock or the door opens up. Okay, that is how all of these pieces actually work in the real world. Next, we have a similar cylinder. This one just has a different style retaining cap. This is actually going to be more of the style that we're working on today. Same rest of components, meaning spring cover, springs, top pins, bottom pins, housing, plug, tail piece. The only parts we're going to introduce are a retaining pin spring, a retaining pin, and a retaining cap that actually threads on or screws on. So I'm going to refer to that as a retaining cap screw. One other thing that I want to verify here is that we do check our definitions on things. And this piece could also, the retaining pin could also be referred to as a detent. A detent is a catch in a machine that prevents motion until released. A system of detents is used to ensure that the gears are held in whenever position is selected. So a detent, that little spring is holding the cap screw from spinning off until it is released. So if I refer to it as detent, that is why I'm doing so. Here, this is one of my web pages, lockreference.com. And lockreference.com is going to have a ton of information. Feel free to go by there anytime. No subscription, completely free for everybody to see out there. So check out LockReference. And we're going to go over some basic terminology here as well. So here we have an SC123 key. This is Schlag's new system. We've got max, which is maximum adjacent cut, is a max of 7. Now, the old Schlag system and all of the information related to it actually claims that there's a max of 6 in that older system. So we're going to go off of that information for the system that we're working on today. This one says there's a max of 7, which basically means that our root depths are the depths of the cuts here. That means we've got 0 through 9 cuts that can be made on this key. And when 0 through 9 cuts can be made on this key, when you have a max of 7 or maximum adjacent cut, it means that we can't cut more than a numeric value of 7 cuts difference from one another. What does that mean in layman's terms? Well, if we have a 0 cut on one cut, the maximum the cut next to it can be, so if our number 1 cut here was a number 1, the maximum value that this cut here could be would be a number 7, coming down to here and then coming back up. Any more than 7, and you're actually going to be cutting into the next cut over, and you're actually going to destroy this cut and make that pin ride on an angle. So that is not what we want to have happen on this. Our progression on this is 2-step. Progression on 2-step means that if we're master keying this lock, we are If we're master keying this lock, what we're going to do is add master pins to it. And in order to do so, that makes multiple keys be able to work this particular lock. When multiple keys can work this lock, then that's called a master key system or a mini master key system. With two-step progression, that simply means that the wafers or the pins are 15,000th increments. When they're 15,000th increments, that means that you're going to need to have more than one cut between the two cuts for master pinning. Let me give you an example of that. If we had a number 1 cut here for the first cut, and I wanted to add another key on top of this that would work with another cut and have a separate cut on top of it, we would have to have a 3 value here. So the next key, or the value that the next cut would have to be, would be 3. So in order to make that next key work, we want a total of 30 thousandths between the cuts for master keying and putting the same pins in the same chamber. Now that's getting a little bit more advanced, and we will talk about that a whole lot more later, but I'm just going to throw that out there and sprinkle it out there for you to understand now. Here we also have the cut angles. We've got the angles that identify the cuts. Without this angle, the key could not work with the key pins and move the key pins up and down smoothly. If the angle is too steep, the key will bind, or if the angle is not there and there's a back angle or a rake angle, the key will not either slide in nor will it come out. That is all important information. Okay. Another bit of information from lockreference.com is what is key bitting specification. Not all manufacturers list the same amount of information for their key bitting specifications. Some manufacturers choose to share more information than others. At least we found that spacing and root depth information is listed by all manufacturers. Schlage, on the other hand, leaves nothing to guesswork. They just about provide every detail necessary for generating and decoding keys, pins, sizing, and all of that for their systems. Regardless, any availability on all master manufacturers' key bitting specifications include the following information: MACS, M-A-C-S, maximum adjacent cut specifications. This is the maximum allowed difference between adjacent cuts. MACS essentially tells you which cuts are allowed to be next to each other. If your max is 7, for example, a 2 cut right next to a 9 cut, because subtracting the difference would be 7. It is at or below 7. So the adjacent cut were 1 and 9, the differences would be a value of 8. This is a violation of MACS and therefore would not be possible in the Schlage Classic key system. Your increment is the distance between suggestive depths. So you look at the root depths, or the dimension from the bottom of the key to the top of the blade, and you'll notice the measurements of difference in successive depths increase or decrease depending on the order in which you read it by. 15 thousandths is the increment for classic Schlage. Progression is defined as the local sequence of selecting possible key bittings, usually numerical order of the key bitting array. That might not make sense in our context, but allow me to explain. Progression relates to master keying and can be represented as either single step or two-step. Okay, we're getting into a lot more complexity here, but I want you to have all these rules in place so that you understand what is happening as we move forward. EPD, or effective plug diameter, is the dimension of the plug obtained by adding the root depth of the key to the length of the corresponding bottom pin to establish the perfect shear line. EPD will not necessarily be the same as the actual plug diameter. So on a Schlage system, it's 500 thousandths or half an inch, roughly. Included angle is a measurement from the sloping surface. So that's what we were looking at here, the sloping surfaces coming down on each sides of this key, to the opposite surface, usually stated in degrees. If you look at the geometry of the cuts, you will see they look very much like a valley. Each side of the definition refers to sloping surface. The measurement between each sloping surface is our included angle. For Schlage Classic, The included angle is 100 degrees. So that's why we had that 100 degrees. Okay, right here, 100 degrees. The root cut, not to be confused with cut root, refers to the measurement of the bottom of the individual cut itself. It is also sometimes referred to as cut flat. So when we're looking at this, this is the cut flat right here, the flat spot on the cut. Okay. Different shapes, bottom of the key, cut flat will always be measurable distance. In our example, the measurement of the bottom of the cut in Schlegg's classic key bitting specifications is 0.31. Okay. So that it would be 31 thousandths. Spacing can refer to TFC or two first cut, refers to the difference between the shoulder or the tip, depending on if it is a tip to bow or bow to tip center. The BCC between cut centers is the distance between the center of adjacent cuts. If you have a lab universal pin kit, it can be found on the manufacturer's box in each side and full spacing information for all bitting specifications. That includes TFC and BCC measurements in respective available spacing measurements. Now, all of this needs to be understood for more complex systems. As we get into this one, we're going to be a little bit more basic, but I wanted to make sure you have more than enough information as opposed to not enough information. Okay, so tools that are going to be required to rekey this cylinder. The main tools that we're going to be using today are a lock cylinder. If you have a cutaway, that would be amazing. If you don't have a cutaway and you just have a regular cylinder, you'll still be able to play along too. And I highly encourage those who have not done this before to play along as well. If you're just watching this for the first time, you can order your first cutaway cylinder or buy a box of locks on eBay or Facebook or wherever you buy that stuff and just get a bunch of locks that you can start rekeying. Next thing we're going to need are pinning tweezers, pinning mat, cap screw removal tool, assorted followers, including master pin followers. Okay. We're also going to need a pin kit and a few other things. So our pinning tweezers are going to be like what's just shown in my hand right here. They're going to have a little notch cut out in them to actually grab the pin, because what happens if you don't do that is the pin will twist and flip and move and do acrobatics as you're trying to insert it into a cylinder, and it just makes things very miserable. So you really need to have this notch cut out in that location. The bottom pin, or the pin has a bottom and a top with the side and with the flat side and a pointy end. Okay, the pointy end is going to go towards the key. So this would be an example of pinning tweezers holding a round small key pin with the pointed end that will go down towards the key and the flat end that will go up towards the lock cylinder. A key gauge to determine the cuts is going to be mandatory. I like anything that has multiple ones on them. This one is big. It's easy to see. They make other ones. There are smaller ones. Sometimes they're hard to read the numbers. This is just easy to use, easy to find, and easy to see. So I like this one here. Anytime we're going to start rekeying a lock, we're going to need to have another key to key it to. The customer may provide this key. You may have a set of pre-cut keys that you use. We use a lot of pre-cut keys just to save on randomizing keys and save on time. You can also cut your own key with a code machine, such as the Freeman number 2, like we talked about earlier, and that sponsored this particular show or event. One of the things I do like to do is actually check my numbers on the key gauge. Sometimes your numbers could be wrong, and locksmiths have a tendency to play tricks on people. For example, a locksmith could take this key and actually cut this to something different, and the numbers may not coincide with the cuts that are on the key anymore. So verifying that all of the cuts are actually accurate is very important. You can see I'm doing that right here on this key gauge. I'm verifying that the 3 is a 3, 5 is a 5, 7 is a 7, 3 is a 3, 3 is a 3, and 7 is a 7. Here's your universal pin kit. This is one of those things that you're going to need, in my opinion, if you're going to do this professionally. Lab sells pin kits in 05 and 03. The 03 is going to have more pins for more locks. Some manufacturers operated in 3,000 increments and some operated in 5,000 increments. That is the only difference between these two pin kits. An 05 pin kit is a 5,000 pin kit that will move each individual section in increments of 5,000. An 03 pin kit, such as this one shown here, will actually be moving in increments of 3,000. So you get more pins and more options with a 3,000 pin kit. This is the one that I would actually recommend. We're also going to need a screwdriver, a Phillips, and a flathead in multiple sizes. I like a nice small one, and Phillips, and a nice small flathead. Okay. Now we're going to actually take a look at our key and knob cylinder or key and lever cylinder. This is it up close and personal. And this is that high quality HD footage that these new phones and cameras have out now that just simply was not available before. And now we can really look at these things up close and personal. Somebody said the video content might not be streaming in HD. I did set it to stream in HD. If it's not, by the time this video actually uploads and compresses, it should be. I did set it for 1080p, so hopefully that will come out in the final version. The next thing that we're going to do is determine our keyway and the number of pins. We have determined this as a Schlage SC keyway. The manufacturer is Schlage. And we have an SC1. You can see it stamped on the key here, SC1. That would be a 5-pin key or a more residential key, okay? The 6-pin key, the SC4, would have 6 pins, same keyway, just a little bit longer. That is the difference between these two keys. To get started, we're going to depress the retaining cap pin, or what I can refer to as the detent as well. And you're going to remove the cap or cap screw. The cap screw removal tool works on some. As you can see here, it will actually interlace into that cap and it will depress the detent as you rotate the cap back off. It does not fit on the one we are currently trying to rekey, so we'll have to do it the old-fashioned way by using a paper clip, a flathead screwdriver, or anything very small such as a lockpick to depress that retaining pin screw or detent and remove the cap screw. Now that we have the cap screw removed, it exposes the retaining pin or the detent so we can see what it looks like. Notice there's a little notch cut in it, like so. And then the entire piece comes out. Now, this is under spring tension, so it will just bink, fly right out of there if you do not pay attention and hold on to it. So don't let that little fella go. This is the retaining pin or detent pin removed. This is the entire thing as it looks in my pinning tweezers. Here is the retaining pin or detent spring. And now you can see what that looks like. This is not to be confused with a key spring or a key pin spring. We'll go over that in just a minute as well. Here we have the cap or cap screw removed and out of the way. This is what it looks like completely removed, and you can see the threads and how it screws on to the plug of the cylinder. Here we have our two-way tailpiece. This can be set up for key and knob or key and lever versions, just by rotating which hole the detent or retaining pin is inserted into. There's a hole here, and there's another one off to the side. You can have the tailpiece lateral or vertical, depending on what application you have. A good side note is to take a picture of your lock cylinder before you start disassembling it so you can put it back together exactly the same way that you found it. Here is a retaining spring or detent spring versus a key spring or driver spring. Okay, the driver spring that goes in the lock housing is much bigger. The detent spring is smaller in diameter, more compressed, and more rigid and springier as well. It has more spring force to it, in my opinion. Don't lose any of these pieces, by the way. Cylinder with all the parts removed, ready to disassemble. Okay, so we now have all of the parts removed off of this cylinder. You can see that we've got the detent or the retaining pin spring and retaining pin gone out of the back of the lock. You can see the threads on the plug. Now we can insert a current working key and go ahead and make sure that it actually meets the shear line like it does here. You can see the shear line is when all of the pins meet in a uniform line, and it is exactly at the edge of the plug, and it allows the cylinder to turn over. As you see here, we're looking at the actual individual pins that go inside this lock in the plug. So this is the lock with meeting the shear line, and this is the shear line rotated over, so we can actually see what is going on inside the lock cylinder. We're going to use the follower to push, never pull. Always push, never pull the plug out of the cylinder. Notice that there are no gaps. This is extremely important. Right here, we make sure that there are no gaps between the follower and the plug. If there are any gaps right here, a driver pin and spring will catch in between the two and damage the cylinder and make that pin drop out, and the spring will also drop out of that lock cylinder, and you'll have to rebuild it. Another good thing to do is verify that your new key has different cuts than the key currently being used. You can see that there is a lower cut on the 6th cut, and there is a higher cut on the first 2 cuts. Schlage Classic Series is always read from bow to tip, meaning the head of the key is the bow and the tip of the key is on the tip down here. So when we read those cuts, we would start off here, cut number 1, cut number 2, cut number 3, cut number 4, cut number 5, and cut number 6. We're also going to check for master pins with the master pin follower, okay? Notice how I have the master pin follower set up in this direction here where it's holding all the pins up. Any professional locksmith should be checking for master pins because you don't know if another locksmith has rekeyed that lock and added them. Even on homes and residential areas, such as a bedroom, you could find master pins inside there. And if you do, you need to make sure you eliminate them and eject them from the equation. So what this master pin follower does is it allows those driver pins or top pins to come down just far enough to shed or drop any of the small master wafers or master pins that could be added to a lock by a locksmith to create master key systems. We want a fresh, clean slate when we rekey our lock. There are several reasons for this. One is, if you rekey a lock and you don't check for master pins and there are master pins in there, you can no longer guarantee that the key that you gave them is the only one that works. Another key is guaranteed to work with it because there are other master pins in the system. So for the customer's sake of security, always check for master pins. The other problem you can have is if you have a small master pin in there and you add a very deep cut, let's say the cut before was a number 1, and I now make that a number 9, and I shove a giant 300 thousandths 9 pin in there, and it tries to crush that other master pin that was on top of there, it's not going to work. The key won't even go in the lock. So if you rekey a lock and the key doesn't go in after you put it all back together, there's a really good chance you forgot to drop master pins. Just go ahead and drop them and check for them and make sure that they're all gone. If you don't have a master pin follower, you can always disassemble the entire cylinder and then reassemble it, or check with pinning tweezers. Now that we have the cylinder and plug completely apart and we have verified there are no master pins in that cylinder, the new key and key pins go into the cylinders. So here is a 210 this is a 210 key pin, and this is a 270 key pin. I believe 210 is number 1. Can't believe I don't know that off the top of my head. Ooh. 210. I'm sorry. 210 is a number 3, and 270 could be, let's see here. 270, we must have got these pins mixed up a little bit. Should be a 275 in there. Now we have the pins all in line in the plug and ready to insert back into the housing. You can see that everything meets the shear line. This is what I call the eye test. Okay. Replacing the pins and reinsert the plug into the lock housing, pushing the follower, never pulling. Pulling creates gaps. Gaps create cylinders that explode. No gaps. I always hold this up to my eye before I put it back together. And if there are any pins that are hanging a little high or a little low, I address those at that point in time and replace that pin. How can this happen? Pins jump around in your pinning kit. Things move around. You grab a one pin and then all of a sudden that ends up in your number 6 container. Okay. People can come by, pinning kits bounce. If you leave the lid off and drive around, the pins jump around inside there. So you do not want to have that happen. You want to make sure that everything is nice and flat and flush and passes the eye test before you shove the plug back into the housing. Insert the plug into the housing and the correct direction. I always like 90 degrees. Some plugs do not. They have like an egg-shaped back piece back here. And in that egg-shaped back piece back here, thank you. 270 is number 7. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. When you insert it back here, I always like to be 90 degrees off. Now, some of them you can only be a few degrees off because that egg shape won't allow the follower to actually follow it out correctly. So some cylinders, you're just going to barely break them over and have to pull that cylinder out at just a few degrees off of 12 o'clock. I prefer 90 degrees when possible. We will now begin to reassemble the cylinder, starting with the retaining pin spring that will go in first, and it will go into the retaining spring hole, as you see here. Reassemble the retaining pin with the pointed tip up, just like you see here, and reassemble the cap or cap screw with the tail piece for correct orientation. So notice there's 2 holes. There's a hole here and a hole here. One of these positions is for key and knob cylinders. The other one is for key and lever cylinders, depending on which one you have. And that's not a universal rule. Most key and knob cylinders go one way, and most key and knob cylinders go the other way. There are exceptions to that rule every time. If you get this all assembled back together and realize that your lock is not going, your cylinder is not going back into the lever or the knob that you pulled it from, there's a good chance that you rotated this tailpiece, and all you have to do is loosen the tailpiece a little and change directions. Push that retaining pin down in and then turn the tailpiece over, and it should start working again and go back together. Once we tighten for as far as tightening instructions for the cap or cap screw, tighten the cap screw to finger tight and then back off 1 notch for proper torque setting. Okay, so that means when I'm tightening this, I tighten it down to finger tight, no vice grips, no Leatherman tool, no wrenches, none of that needed. Barely finger tight like an axle nut. Okay, like an axle nut, if you've ever greased or packed a wheel bearing or a trailer axle nut or a truck axle nut, you tighten it up and then you back it off just a little bit. Same concept here. So we back it off 1 notch. If you see space like the one on the right-hand side here, there's a good chance that this is too loose and the key will not come out of the cylinder. Number 1 problem is torque setting. Too tight and the cylinder will be stiff and not smooth to operate. The solution would be to back off an additional click and see if that solves the problem. Should solve your problem right there. Some cap screws are not completely perfectly round, so you may have spots where it works smooth and then you turn it a little more and it has a rough hang-up area. It's because that cap is not completely perfectly smooth. Back it off 1 more notch. As long as the key still comes out, that should fix the problem. If the cap screw is too loose, then the key will not come out in most cases. It will not release at all, or it will not release easily. We see this all the time in the field when a customer can't pull their key out of the lock cylinder. What's happening is it's binding against the key pins and it's pulling on them, and the key pins are driven into the cuts of the key and nothing is moving. Okay, so the solution for that would be tighten 1 click until the key removes smoothly. You may have to do this several times. Congratulations, you have now successfully rekeyed a Schlage SC Keyway 6-pin key from start to finish using basic tools and done completely professionally. We also have a video on this.
All right, so we need to put all these tools.
This is going to be in action video, so you can actually watch and see every step along the way as I do it.
Tools to good use and put them to work. So we have identified that we have a Schlage SC keyway that is confirmed by the SC stamp on the key, and that key slides right in. So we have a Schlage SC 6-pin. Again, we're going to have to count the pins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6-pin key. This is all very important information because, like this one here,
what we can actually do is I will, if it's not very easy to see, what I can do is actually bring this up in our files here, and we'll just watch it directly on the screen since we're doing a screen share. No sound? Are you guys saying there's no sound? Is there sound now? If somebody could respond. Okay, so I've got a no and a yes. Do we have sound from the video? Yes or no? My voice only. My voice only. Why do we not have sound? Why do we not have sound? Okay, so now I'm going to have to figure out through StreamYard why we don't have sound. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out why the sound is not coming through the other screen. Let's see here. Edit name, stop screen. Extra camera. It does not give me the option to give you audio. Default mic. Echo cancellation. Reduced mic background noise. Did not know this would be a problem. I'll tell you what, I'll just go ahead and voice over the whole thing. Can't do that either because the video is playing. I love new systems. I love figuring out new systems. I'm not sure I can play the video for you, unfortunately. This is a technical comes through each time. So I do not know how to share the video audio with you, unfortunately. Yeah, it's gonna take time for me to do that, unfortunately. What is happening here? Okay. You should have the basics. The video was just icing on the cake. It's going to be going over all the things that we went over in the PowerPoint presentation. Until I figure out how to get sound through StreamYard, it doesn't work the same as Zoom, unfortunately. So I will not be able to do that right now. But hopefully everybody got a great idea of exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. And if that works, great. Until next time, we'll see you later. Enjoy. Thanks for watching. These will get better. Obviously, we've got more high quality HD video. We've got a new streaming service that provides high quality digital streaming. It actually does work better than Zoom does when it does work. However, we just need to figure out how to get the audio through the screen share. Once we go ahead and do that, it'll be a lot easier for you. So thank you so much for watching. Wonderful. Have a great day. And we'll see you next Monday, every Monday, 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, right here. Thanks for watching and have a great day, guys and ladies. Enjoy. Yeah. Oh, fuck. Enjoy.